Hey folks, Mr. Olson here. Let's do some econ. We're in macro unit 2, and this lesson is about the second goal of macroeconomics, which is to limit unemployment. So what is unemployment? Well, workers that are actively looking for a job but aren't working. And a lot of students are surprised by this. They think that anyone who's not working is considered unemployed, but it's actually folks who are actively looking for jobs and aren't able to find one. What we use as our main indicator is the unemployment rate, which is the percentage of people who are in the labor force who want a job but are not actively working. So to get the unemployment rate, you take the total number unemployed, you divide by the number of folks in the labor force, and then you multiply it by 100. Who in a society is in the labor force? Anyone who's 16 years and older, anyone who is able and willing to work, and anyone who's not institutionalized. So if you're in jail or you're hospitalized, you're not part of the labor force. We also don't count the military, any full-time students, or obviously anyone who's retired in the labor force. Okay, so based on these definitions, you should be able to articulate why we wouldn't count a stay-at-home mom as not unemployed. Okay, and the reason we wouldn't count her is because she's not willing to work. Right, so she may have all kinds of amazing marketable skills, but if she's choosing to stay home to watch her children, she is not considered part of the labor force because she's not willing to work. So here's a practice multiple choice question to help you practice calculating the unemployment rate. Go ahead and pause the video and give it a try. Correct answer for this one is C, 6%. The total population is 180. In 180 million, you subtract out the 80 million who are not in the labor force. That gives you a total labor force size of 100 million, and then 6 of those 100 are unemployed. So let's further break down unemployment and look at the 3 types of unemployment. And I think you're going to be surprised that of the 3 types, we're actually okay with 2 of the 3. So first off is frictional unemployment. If you are frictionally unemployed, you are temporarily unemployed or between jobs. The way I think about this is if you're frictionally unemployed, you're having friction in your life at this time. Okay. If you're frictionally unemployed, you're qualified and you have transferable skills. So employers are still interested in hiring you based on the human capital that you have. You're just sort of between jobs. You might be moving towns. You may have just graduated from college and you're comparing different job offers. Okay. Or you may have gotten fired. So even if you got fired and you're looking for a better job, as long as you have transferable skills that are still demanded in that economy, you are frictionally unemployed. Okay. A subcategory of frictional unemployment is seasonal unemployment, and that's when you are out of a job because of the time of year and the nature of your job. So my cousin Ryan used to build fences up in Alaska, and he would become frictionally unemployed, which more specifically seasonally unemployed in the winters when he couldn't work outside, right? Or a lot of folks who work in retail become seasonally unemployed after the Christmas season is over. Second type of unemployment is structural unemployment, which is when you're unemployed due to changes in the labor force that makes some skills obsolete. So the way I remember this is that the structure of the economy has changed. So if there's some structural change in the economy and your skills are obsolete, you are structurally unemployed. The key differentiator here is that these workers who are structurally unemployed do not have transferable skills. And those jobs that they have are never going to come back. Right. And what an economist would say is you got to figure out new skills that are going to be marketable in the labor force. Okay. When we have a permanent loss of jobs, that's called creative destruction. Right now, why would the structure of the economy change? Globalization has changed the structure of a lot of the labor market in the U.S. and a lot of manufacturing labor is no longer demanded in the US. And overall, it's because innovation is happening and more trade is happening and new industries are being born. That's the kind of the process of creative destruction. The whole economy is getting better, but unfortunately, there's going to be people who lose out from that particular phenomenon. VCR repairman is a classic example of this. In the 1980s, if you were a VCR repairman, you had highly marketable skills and everyone needed to get their VCRs worked on. However, because of technological change and innovations, no one has VCRs anymore, so those skills are obsolete. A milkman is also another job that is no longer needed because of improvements in pasteurization and refrigeration techniques. A subcategory of structural unemployment is technological unemployment. That's a type of structural unemployment where automation and machinery has replaced workers, right? In fact, most examples that come to mind about structural unemployment are actually technological unemployment. The third and final type of unemployment is cyclical unemployment, and that's caused by a recession. So think about, to help you remember this term, think about the business cycle. So a downturn in the business cycle is going to cause cyclical unemployment. In the whole economy, if demand for goods and services falls, then the demand for the labor that those goods and services produce falls as well. That's sometimes called demand deficient unemployment. So examples of that are steelworkers being laid off during a recession, restaurant owners firing waiters after poor sales due to a recession, or high unemployment during the Great Depression, or folks who lost their jobs due to the COVID-19 crisis. So anytime a downturn in the business cycle or a recession is the cause of you losing your job, then you are cyclically unemployed. Okay, so we have three types, okay? And this leads us to the idea of the natural rate of unemployment. Many people out there assume that our goal would be to have an unemployment rate of 0, but that's not actually our goal. Now, what I want you to think about is why might that be the case? Of the three types we've gone over, which two actually are we okay with having some of and actually represent a healthy economy? Okay. And the answer is frictional and structural. In a society, if we have frictional and structural unemployment, we're always going to have some of those, and we're actually okay with that, right? We want some workers to be confident enough to quit their job and try to find a better one, right? Or move to a city where there's new opportunity for them. We want you, when you guys graduate from college from 4 years from now, to be able to compare different job offers, right? For there to be no frictional unemployment, the second you finish school, you'd have to immediately take a job. And then it might not be in the best interest of you or society. Okay. And then we actually want some structural unemployment as well, because that means that innovations are occurring and technology is improving in that society. Okay, so the economy is actually doing great if there's only frictional and structural unemployment. And this leads to the idea of the natural rate. So if you sum up the frictional and structural unemployment in society, that gives you the natural rate of unemployment, and it means the economy is healthy, and it means it's growing. When a society has its natural rate of unemployment, it is considered operating at full employment output. So to have full employment output, your current unemployment rate is the natural rate of unemployment, and the real GDP produced by that is the full potential GDP, and there's no cyclical unemployment. In the US, the textbooks say the full employment output for the US is somewhere between 4 and 6%. We usually round it and say 5%. However, this is something that's changing right now. This is a really exciting field in econ. This is incredibly important as the government's looking at different stimulus packages to boost the economy right now. At the end of the world's largest expansion in our business cycle in 2019, unemployment rate was way below 4%, and you didn't see the inflation that you would expect from that, right? So some people are saying that our full employment natural rate of full employment output with our natural rate of unemployment is actually below 4%. It might be something more like 3. So this is an exciting field that's changing now. All right, let's connect two models. Let's connect the production possibilities curve from way back in Unit 1 to the business cycle with something that we're developing now. And what I want you to learn from this slide is that these two models are talking to each other and they're expressing the same ideas. We said before, if we were here at this red dot inside the PPC, we were inefficient, we weren't utilizing our resources appropriately, and that is expressing the same thing as being down here on a downturn in the business cycle, right? So you can demonstrate where a whole economy is at any given time, on either of these models, and these are communicating to each other and expressing the same place, right? We also talked about being efficient on the PPC. That's the same thing as being on the trend line in the business cycle. That's your potential real GDP output, okay? So the yellow dot is the same situation as the yellow dot. Okay. The green dot is interesting. So we're going to complicate your view. What we said back in Unit 1 is that any dot outside your PPC, which is your full employment output PPC, would be impossible. Now we're going to complicate that and say you could actually potentially, in the short run, produce beyond your PPC. Okay, and that would be the equivalent of your economy being overheated and producing more than your potential output. What does that mean if you're operating at this green dot? It's not going to last long. You're eventually going to come back to your trend line, but it means unemployment is super, super low. Okay, and when unemployment's super, super low, then you're going to have lots of people working, lots of people earning paychecks, and you're going to have the more dollars chasing the same amount of goods, which is eventually going to lead to inflation. And as you'll learn later in this unit, which is going to cause another downturn in the business cycle. Okay, so anyway, the green dot and the green dot are expressing the same ideas. In European countries like France and Germany, the natural rate of employment is actually more like 8 or 10%. Why do you think this might be? What do you know about these societies that might explain this difference? Okay, the answer is that some economists attribute that difference to more generous unemployment benefits in European countries. Okay, so if you have more unemployment benefits that last longer, people are going to remain frictionally unemployed longer. They also tend to have more generous supports for people who lose their jobs due to globalization. So structurally unemployed folks are also not going to get retrained and back into the labor force as quickly. There's more friction in the labor markets in European countries because there are more workers' rights protections, so it's harder to fire workers. So for all these reasons, their natural rate of unemployment is higher than in the US, right? And this reminds me of the idea that there are no solutions, there are only trade-offs, right? We want generous protections and generous unemployment insurance for workers, and there's many benefits to that, but there's no such thing as a free lunch, right? And one of the costs of that is you have a higher natural rate of unemployment. And what that means is even when the economy is performing really well, you're going to have more folks out of work than in the US, okay? More specifically in the US, generally unemployment lasts during normal times for only 6 months, and it can be indefinite in some European countries. So go ahead and pause this video, try this excerpt from a worksheet. You need to be able to identify what type of unemployed each of these folks are. So do examples 1 through 9 and figure out if they're structurally, cyclically, or frictionally unemployed. And here is a slide with the answers so you can check your work and see if you're getting it. Now, the unemployment rate is not perfect. There are many criticisms to the unemployment rate. Here are a couple of the main ones. A lot of people say that the unemployment rate actually misdiagnoses the actual unemployment rate in society because of discouraged workers. So if you give up looking for a job, you are a discouraged worker and you're not actively seeking for work. So guess what, folks? You're not part of the labor force, and those folks aren't going to be counted by the normal unemployment rate. So in addition to the unemployment rate, something that we really have to look out for is a labor force participation rate, okay? And the labor force participation rate is a percentage of people who are in the labor force. And if people leave, then if people leave the labor force, unemployment's actually going to fall. The unemployment rate's actually going to fall if people leave the labor force. So that's not a good thing, and that's a shortcoming of this statistic, right? So every month, the first Friday of every month, the Bureau of Labor Statistics comes out with their monthly jobs report data, and that's something you also really, really want to watch. In addition to that mainline rate, what's happening to the labor force participation rate. Second problem with the unemployment rate is the idea of underemployed workers. Okay, you are underemployed if you want more hours, but you're not able to get them. So if you want to work 40 hours a week to help take care of your family, but you're only able to get 10, we would still count you as fully employed based on the unemployment rate. So that shortcoming is not going to be accounted for. Additionally, it doesn't matter what type of job you have, right? So I'm a teacher I have a teaching credential, I have a master's in education, but if I was working at Five Guys Burgers, I would be counted as an employee, right? And that wouldn't be, I wouldn't be optimizing my labor at the time, but we wouldn't be able to differentiate that type of thing. If you're working, period. We don't care what type of job you have. Okay. And another huge issue are race and age and gender inequalities. Many more women have been negatively affected and lost their jobs and left the labor force participation during the COVID recession. The African American unemployment rate is higher than the white unemployment rate, as another example. So when we look at that baseline number, we're not accounting for disparities out there, and that's a major shortcoming of that mainline statistic. Okay. This is a diagram from Krugman, so there are other versions of it. So you can see the main unemployment rate here, and then you can include different groups if you want to get other information to help you understand what's going on in the economy. Okay, last practice question here. Go ahead and pause the video, see if you're getting it and you're getting more comfortable with this language. Correct answer is D, equal to the national rate. So if an economy is in equilibrium at its potential gross domestic product, the actual unemployment rate is equal to the national rate. All right, folks, so that's how the unemployment rate works. Despite those shortcomings, it's a great indicator to help us understand where the economy is at. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.